I don't recall what it is. Yes, I knew you were coming. I spoke to the Baptist Easley Hospital Board today about the program. So, come on, you guys. Do you find it, Biff?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Did you find it?
It's gonna be a little bit slower on mine.
It's okay. You don't even have to. It's not like you ask right away. You can even write them down. You can even write them down if you want. You know, if you want, you don't have to. Many times I kind of straight through. I'm gonna go over that. Boundaries and guilt. And this is our first time, so we got to be patient with this. We're going to work this out. This is extremely important because I met with some people.
Is this a good angle? Should we change the angle?
We're going to get stuff to change it, raise it up. This angle gets criticized.
Yeah, we just have
But we're going to fix that. Like, so for example, right now, is anybody saying anything on here?
Rocky Meadows says, I'm sending you a tripod this week. It's way too good for this camera angle.
Tell Rocky Meadows I said I put the non back in nonprofit. All right, guys, we're going to get the show on the road. I'm going to pass this sign-in sheet around. If you don't mind giving us your name, phone number, email. You don't have to do that, but we try to keep in contact with people the best we can. There's also a column on the very far, I guess the far right, and it's for a family, individual family recovery coach if you're interested. So we have a couple different ways that you can get individual support at Favor Greenville. One is we have a 24-hour helpline. So when you call that line, you're going to get a live coach. They're going to answer the phone, and they're going to answer your questions. It tends to be family members that use that line. Obviously, anybody can. The person themselves can call, and sometimes they do, and they talk through like a crisis situation. But most of the time, it's mom or dad or husband or wife calling and saying, hey, can you tell me about a good rehab? Tell me about a good location that I can send my loved one, or how can I put together an intervention? You call there, all questions are good questions. Now here's the thing. That call line is staffed by our paid coaches, all right? They're supervised by me, and they're very good at what they do. And if you call and you don't get them and you leave a message, they're gonna call you back. The only reason they're not gonna answer is if they're on the other line. It's unfortunately, well, I guess maybe this is a good thing. The volume has gone up in terms of calls. I guess it's a bad thing in terms of the need. We wish this wasn't going on. I say it all the time. We're in a business that's booming. We wish it wasn't. But the volume is up. The volume on those calls is up. So sometimes you have to bear with that part of the process. The second way that you can get individual coaching for family. And so why would you need individual coaching? Maybe there's something you want to talk about that you don't want to talk about in front of the group. Maybe you feel like you just need to meet with somebody one time and explain the situation so you can get some direct advice. You can also check the box on the very end. It's for family coach. Now we've gotten a little bit backed up with our coaching, again, just related to volume. So we also recommend that even if you have your name on here and you need something, you call that call line. The call line phone numbers are out front on the desk. Does anybody have any questions about that part of the process? Anything I can clarify?
I can speak to the effectiveness of it.
I like that guy. Did you hear what he said? We will say he can speak to the effectiveness of it. So if anybody has any questions, ask him. Coaching is interesting. It can be anything from I'm just going to listen while you talk. If you've been through a bad situation with somebody you love and you're scared and you're anxious and you're nervous, sometimes all you need is somebody to sit across from you and listen, and you know they're not going to judge you because these are family coaches who have been through this themselves. They're not going to judge anything that you did or anything you didn't do or anything like that. And then the second thing is just really solid problem solving. If you've ever been in any situation, you know if you talk it out loud and you try to recognize what the options are and get some advice. And sometimes people meet, like I said, one time, and sometimes people meet for years. There's no right or wrong way to do the coaching end of it. Any other questions about coaching?
How often is that just up to?
It's up to you guys. It's a great question. A lot of our coaching is done over the phone. People will, call each other. Carol, you can correct me if I'm wrong because Carol is an active coach with us, but the majority of them, I don't want to make it sound like you're coming in and you're sitting down with somebody for an hour and you're tell me about your week and tell me how you're doing it. Tell me about your relationship with your mother when you were 3 years old, right? None of that is going on. It's the house is on fire. I'm worried to death. You got any ideas? Can I help you through that? And then the other is truly, I'm losing my mind. Can you help me figure out how to deal with stress? So a lot of it's done on the phone.
Another big one is setting boundaries, knowing how to set boundaries, when to kick them out. A lot of them are just spur of the moment questions they have, and you call and you can answer quickly. Others we have to meet and talk about.
And this is the important part because when Favor Greenville first started, it was just the Rich Jones show. I was the only one. It was my phone number on the front of the door. And I took every call and dealt with every situation, and I can't do that anymore. We have 3 sites and 8 different hospital locations. We have about 45,000 folks that we've touched across the upstate. So now we've put together a team, but every Tuesday I supervise that team. So if Carol comes in and she says, Mrs. Jones called last night, here was the question she had, I don't really know what to say, I'm going to give her the direct information about that. So I'm directly involved with all of these cases in all of these situations. It's just I'm not in the position anymore where I can take all the calls. Again, because when we planned this thing, we thought we'd have about 800 people showing up. We had 800 people by Wednesday of the first week when we opened. That was a joke, guys. Come on, loosen up here tonight. Let's get loosed up. Come on. All right. If you're here for the first time, this is a hard topic to talk about. People come in here. It's a stressful situation. You're worried. Maybe all you need to know about addiction, or maybe you've never even heard about addiction. But we know for sure it's not a comfortable situation. So we'll try to laugh a little bit tonight. Understand there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Every single person in this room, there are things we've done with our loved ones that we wish we could take back. There's times we've gotten it right. There's times we've gotten it wrong. There is no, like for parenting, for example, there is no manual for parenting. So give yourself a break and ask questions along the way. Make sure if there's something I'm missing in terms of just straight information that I give it to you, or I'll do my best that I can to give it to you and talk you through your question. So a couple other orders of business. We talked in here several times about possibly splitting this group and changing the format. We have the office next door, and we will be doing this, but we don't have the room to split this group. Plus, I am trying out some new technology, And I'm actually going to try to get through a Facebook Live without it shutting off. And I'm going to have some questions asked. If you're out there in Facebook land, send your questions in. Elizabeth is going to forward these questions to me. Lisa Mincy is also watching from home, and she's going to try to answer questions. We're going to try to integrate the audience into this a little bit. Really, I'm only doing this for one reason. I said this last week. I want somebody to be like, Rich from Wichita wants to know. You know, it's kind of like, cool, man. All right. So if there's anybody out there from Wichita or wherever, please send in your questions. We'll do the best we can to answer those. And then we'll post this on my personal Facebook page. The goal with this is for it to get better. We're going to do it where we can actually try to show PowerPoints and people can interact with this process more. And we're going to invest a little bit of time and money into that. We want to reach as many people as we can with just straight up information, because knowledge can help start to clear this up. Any other questions about format or anything like that? All right. So this is who I am professionally. I'm a therapist. I've spent a bunch of time working in clinical settings like inpatient rehab, outpatient mental health, outpatient drug and alcohol. Been an interventionist. I spent the majority of my career doing pretty traditional stuff, for lack of a better term. I've been doing recovery coaching work for 6 years. This is Favor Greenville's 6th year. So we've been up and running, and we've working with about 45,000 folks altogether and about 10,000 families along the way. And this isn't the only family group we do. We also do one in Anderson, South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Then we have a group downtown at Trinity Lutheran Church. And we have a group for spouses or significant others on Thursday night at 6:30. Anybody's welcome to be at this group. It can be spouses and parents. But what happened was we got feedback along the way where spouses were kind of like, hey, Rich, man, I don't know if I'm into that like touchy-feely, give them a break type stuff. I'm going to kill somebody in their sleep. So where can I go talk about that? You know, it's kind of like, it's one thing to deal with setting boundaries with your husband or your wife. It's a whole nother ball game to deal with setting boundaries when it's your kid. That is just a stone cold fact. So what we've done is everybody's welcome to any group, but the SOS group is more spouses. That stands for significant other support. And I named that group. That's fantastic. I spent a lot of time with our marketing department, our public relations department to come up with that name. Did a real good job and trademarked that bad boy. All right. So let's start off. We're going to talk about boundaries tonight, but I wanted to go back to a little bit of basics, and don't get too caught up in the list. Let's think of the general principle. You're here tonight. You're worried. You're not sure what you're dealing with, or maybe you're very sure what you're dealing with. Maybe you're dealing with somebody who's on the beginning of their journey. You just started to find out that they have an issue with this. Maybe you're dealing with somebody who has had a relapse. Maybe you're dealing with somebody who has been dealing with it, and everybody knows they've been dealing with it, but they're just so obstinate and obnoxious and out of control that nobody can touch them. Regardless of the situation, one of the things that might help is you ask yourself, what are all my options? What are all the options that I have in a broad sense to deal with my situation? And I'm going to go through what I identify as all your options and stop being asked questions. The very first thing that you can do, and this is an option, is you can do nothing new. You can leave here tonight. You don't have to set a boundary. You don't have to have a conversation. You don't have to ever come back here again. You can do nothing new. There are pluses to that, right? What are the pluses to doing nothing new? It's not that hard. You've been doing it already. You don't have, well, it's hard, but it's not hard in the sense that you have to do anything different. You don't have to ever come back here and hear me again. It's relatively, how about that? It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So a lot of times, what most people will do, and it really isn't people who come to this group, but people who are dealing with this, they'll literally just go on in the exact same situation. If you want to know the most common outcome for these situations is it just lingers. And it kind of is always there. And it's sort of the conflict is either up here or it's here. And sometimes it's okay and everybody's taking a breath, but most of the time something's going off. And you live crisis to crisis. I don't know how many people can relate to that. You just wait, and if the phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, you jump out of your skin. And if you start texting your loved one and they don't answer, you start pacing back and forth, right? But that is an option, guys, and we support you with that, and we would recommend you keep coming back and learn more about it. The second area is you can start to initiate boundaries. One of the ways we'd be thinking about this would be not the big stuff. Carol mentioned, how do I know whether I should ask somebody to leave the house? How do I know whether I should say, you can no longer stay here? I'm not talking about those type of boundaries. Other type of boundaries, like maybe you stop taking calls certain times of the day because you just hate the way you feel when that goes down. Maybe you're paying for something and you think, if I feel like I've been giving this person money and it's just going down the tube, and maybe I need to back off on that. You start to change your behavior, because if you change your behavior, it impacts your loved one's behavior. So, and I want to stop here for a minute and really point this out, because there is power in this part of the approach, guys. There is absolutely power in the idea of the family is interconnected. It's like a baby's mobile. And if you move one part of the family, you move the whole entire family. So you can even start changing the way you respond to situations. If you're the type of person who is very confrontive and your loved one comes in the door and you think they were getting high and your response is, I know you were getting high, you were with so-and-so, and then what happens? It turns into a fight. They start screaming. You start screaming. You wish you wouldn't have started this at all. They start screaming back, telling you how you're crazy. They storm out the door, and then you spend the rest of the night pacing the floor wondering if they're okay, because the last time there was a terrible incident was because they went out and got high when they were, angry. That's what you're telling yourself. If that's a common scenario, just flip the script, and the next time the person comes home, don't say anything at all. Don't say anything at all. Here's what happens. When we're in active addiction, when I was actively using, actively doing my thing, you fall into patterns. You fall into unconscious patterns of your behavior. Now, you could almost write a script for it, guys. You can say, he's going to come in, you're going to say this, then he's going to say this, then it's going to go here. And remember, those of us, when we're using, we want to stay in that script because it's comfortable, it's familiar, and it's a subconscious message of, I can continue to do this. As soon as you start doing something different, it gets me wondering. I mean, I remember when my wife wouldn't argue with me, and it would be like, what is going on here? Like, this is freaky, man. This isn't what's supposed to be happening. So you can start, I don't want to say messing with the person, but for lack of a better term, you can start messing with the person. And and you're sending an unconscious message that goes like this: something's going to be different in this relationship. If you guys interact the exact same way every single day or every single incident, why would anybody ever think that anything was going to be different? You guys understand that? If everything is a conflict and a fight, and you're trying to catch the person doing something wrong, and they're trying to evade you and push back and yell, if you stop doing that, this is a good one. If you've been putting a tracking device in their car and following them around town, I don't mean a tracking device they consented to. I mean one that you implanted under their skin while they were sleeping at night. You're driving. If you're the type of person who's really, really obsessed with it, and almost like a private investigator, start to try to back off. Start to try to do something different. So that's an option. The third thing that you can do is you can try to plan a family meeting. And this is different than an intervention, very important. This would be, can you get anybody else that would be willing to meet with you and your loved one and just express your concern and your love and tell them you're worried and just start talking about getting help. It's not an intervention, though. I'm going to talk about an intervention here in a second. It's not an intervention. An intervention is very structured and very confrontational. This is not an intervention. This is a family meeting where you get more than just you, because what typically happens is somebody winds up being the point person for this problem in most families. Somebody winds up being the main person who's having all the phone calls, dealing with all the issues. You want to get other people involved. It's harder for your loved one to argue with all of you than it is one of you. Your loved one can make one person, I could take any one person apart and explain how you're crazy and how it's not really what you think it is, and left is right and up is down. We've talked about this before, right? One of the main things was I made my wife question her own sanity. She didn't know was she seeing what she thought she saw. But you put yourself in a room with other people, and now you have mom and dad and maybe your boyfriend and other people, and they all start to say the same thing, it gets harder to argue it away. Then the fourth option is you can do an intervention. Now, Favor Greenville, we don't do interventions. We help you facilitate meetings, but we can refer you to interventionists around town. The reason we don't do interventions, they're incredibly staff intensive. You guys have probably seen interventions on TV. How many people have seen those or possibly participated in one, right? You know, it's like, hey, if you don't go get help today, you can no longer live here. If you don't go get help today, we're contacting your probation officer. If you don't go get help today, we're not paying for you to go back to school, whatever it is. The difference between a meeting and an intervention is there's an ultimatum attached in an intervention. It ends with essentially the bottom line of, and if you don't. A meeting does not do that. A meeting is a discussion. Any questions about a meeting or an intervention? Even out there in Facebook land, if you have any questions, shoot them in too. Any questions about the difference between a meeting and an intervention? The hardest thing about an intervention is finding an interventionist. And you have to make sure as a family that you're ready to do an intervention. You can't be lukewarm about it, guys. It's like an intervention is a period of time when it gets very, very real. Because think about it, you're going in there and you're saying to the person, this can't go on. And here's what's going to happen if it does go on. And if you say that out loud, you have to be prepared to follow through on it. If you say it out loud and you don't follow through, then there's nothing going to change. So, and people are going to think what? They don't mean what they say. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing no matter what. So really think it through as you start to consider whether or not you want to do an intervention. And then the fifth option is, and believe it or not, this is the hardest one of all, is just to do old school emotional and physical detachment. Anybody know what that is? Anybody ever been coached on detachment? So what do I mean by detachment? It feels like I don't care, right? You know what it is?
We have a question.
Oh, okay. Let's get to questions.
Our family.
Where are they from? Where are they from?
I'm not sure where.
Okay, ask
say. Are family meetings more effective than interventions?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Are family meetings more effective than interventions? So here's the deal. Family meetings are more effective than interventions in terms of actual outcomes on the back end, because people, when they go to treatment via family meeting, tend to be less aggressive and angry. They feel like they have more control, and therefore they jump into the treatment process sooner. Now, on an intervention, you spend 2 weeks working with the person to try to calm them down. They spend 2 weeks how angry they are. I can't believe the disjustice of the fact that they, put this intervention together and threaten me. Whereas a family meeting, the person feels a little bit more, don't get me wrong, they're still going because they feel like, they have to, but there's a little bit less anger to work through. And think about your average rehab experience. You're going for 30 days. If you spend the first 2 weeks working through the anger toward your mom, how much therapy are you getting? So in that sense, a meeting is more effective than an intervention. An intervention, however, is when it's dangerous, okay? When it's dangerous and it's DEFCON 5 in the sense that if we don't do something today, somebody's going to die. If we don't do something today, somebody's going to jail. Like you just have that, your spidey senses are going off, right? It's escalating. And intervention is more appropriate during those situations. Because remember, an intervention this is changing today one way or the other. Do you guys get that? One of the things that happened with interventions here at Favor Greenville, when we used to do them back in the days, we never charged for anything here at Favor. And the problem was people were saying they wanted to do interventions when they didn't really want to do an intervention. Because when they got in the room, what would happen? It would get really, really intense. And then they were unable to follow through with what they said they were going to say. That's not a good position for the staff either. So that's why we refer out for the interventions now. I'll be honest with you, most people get it done with a meeting. Now, many times they have to do it over and over again. This is another thing about a meeting. You can think about a meeting as not one meeting, but you can do it over and over because the family can just put it together. I mean, I think about my experience when I was, doing my thing out there. I shared who I was professionally. Personally, I'm in recovery from an opioid use disorder and an alcohol use disorder, but opioids just destroyed my life. I was in a car accident in 1999, and, I walked out of the emergency room with $120 set. And it was just all over, man. These things, like, it was like love at first sight or something. And it was all the stuff that goes with this. I did not go to the street to get anything, because back in that time, you couldn't really do that. It wasn't commonplace. But when I was out there kind of doing my thing and going about that, if somebody would have had a meeting on me and then said, we're meeting again next Wednesday, and we're meeting again next Wednesday, and we're meeting again next Wednesday, and our family's going to keep getting together and talk about you, Rich, I'd have been like, I'll go to rehab just to shut y'all up. Because that would drive somebody actively using crazy, guys. Just want to give you remember, I'll give you the playbook for addiction, right? Like, because when we apply to become addicted, we have to go through a training. Some of you believe that. There are people out there that like, whoa, no, I'm just kidding. But it's weird when you talk to people, there sort of is a playbook. And one of those is we can't stand the idea of people talking about us. And we certainly can't stand the idea of people in our family getting together and doing a game plan and talking about us. So, many people be like, I'm going just so we don't have to have this happening. Remember, the majority of people go to treatment or go to recovery or whatever it is with no intention of doing it. They go to get people off their back. Have you ever heard the phrase that a person has to be willing to be successful at recovery? That is not true. A person has to eventually become willing to stay in recovery. It will happen over time. Nobody goes to treatment or recovery. I shouldn't say nobody. I haven't met the person yet who went to treatment or recovery kind of like on their own volition, like, well, see, man, it's Monday the 28th. This is a good day to go to rehab. Yep. Let me make some phone calls. Doesn't go down like that. How does it go down? Boss is going to fire me. Wife is going to kick me out. Probation officer is coming by to put me in jail. You guys get it? Like, that's the common stuff. Carol?
When we did our family meeting / intervention on my daughter, she said, I will go if you'll stop and let me have some heroin on the way.
Wow. So, yeah, what did you do?
Well, my ex-husband took her. So
Yeah.
She did not stop.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I don't know if you could hear that, but like her daughter basically said, I'll go, but I need to get something to go for the ride. I've never done that, but I have been in situations and interventions, and one not that long ago, to tell you the truth. It wasn't an intervention, more like a situation, I guess, where the person went through alcohol withdrawal, and I got him alcohol. Yeah. It was funny. I used a Favor Greenville credit card to buy a 40. And I turned it into our secretary. And she sent me a picture of it and said, can we talk about this? A 40 ounce of, oh my gosh. A 40 ounce of beer. A 40 ounce of beer. Yep. Because what happens whenever you're going through physical withdrawal, if you take a little bit of a drink, it'll stem off the withdrawal. But people have done stuff like that. People have absolutely gotten in their mind, let's just get them to rehab. You guys get this part? Let's get you to rehab. Let's get you to the next step, whatever it is. And then you're going to get there. You're going to be detoxed anyway. And as time goes by, you're going to become willing. But very rare. I mean, how could a person even really be willing? Think about it. They're not even thinking rationally. They don't know. They don't really know what they even want. So you're going to get the heat off. When you go, you get the heat off, and then over time, you become willing. And there is truth to that. It's very hard to do this recovery thing long term if you don't eventually do it for yourself. You guys get it? But don't feel like your loved one has to be doing cartwheels on the way to rehab and be happy. I mean, that's kind of weird, to tell you the truth. If somebody came in rehab and they were too happy, that was scary. That was kind of concerning, right? There's something up here, man. There's some kind of like hidden agenda, or some kind of, this person isn't processing things right. It is not a pleasant thing to go to rehab. Y'all get that? It's not. Yes.
We have another
We
question.
have another question.
How can we change the culture of shame that makes it so difficult for families to ask for help?
Okay, so tell Michael Crouch I said hi.
Okay.
Is that Michael Crouch?
Yes.
How did I know that? So tell Michael, I'm not sure if that's an appropriate question for the family group, but he wants to know, how do we change the culture of shame? Do you guys know what we mean by the culture of shame? This idea that you guys did something wrong. The words enabler, codependent, anything that you hear that makes you feel less than. Anytime you leave an interaction or a situation where you feel worse about yourself would be the culture of shame. And the idea would be the more you pull away from that, or the more you avoid that, and you come to places that don't roll like that, that aren't about trying to tell you exactly how to do things, and aren't about trying to tell you, label you with any certain behavior. Rather, try to talk to you about what you're doing that's maybe not part of the problem, but what you're doing that's maybe not pushing the person toward good decisions, right? Like let's give you some examples. Paying for the rent if the person's actively using. That would be an example. So we wouldn't call that enabling. We would call that a trauma response, a learned behavior, not a good decision though. Can we all agree with that? And what we would say is, let's stay away from the labels and let's work on changing the behavior. The reason is, what you guys are going through is incredibly stressful. This is a very serious healthcare issue that a lot of times you're probably worried. You probably have a worst case scenario thinking in your mind. In our opinion, it's not necessarily appropriate to throw anything else on you in terms of, here, people have come in and I'm the world's worst enabler, and they'll hang their head. Now, people would say to me, Rich, you have to confront that because families are in denial. I don't believe families are in denial. This is just my take. I believe families are literally operating from a trauma response. And I'm not saying that there aren't any families out there in denial. They know that this issue is serious. Denial means you don't think it's a problem. You guys get that? That's why there's also very few people who are using drugs that are in denial. Denial means it's not there, it's no big deal. What's going on with families is it's too scary to change. It's not that you don't know you need to change. You know you need to change. It's too scary to change, though, because it goes back to my original comment. The devil you know versus the devil you don't. Okay, I get it. I'm paying the rent. I shouldn't be paying the rent, but at least I know he has a place to live. And if I stop paying the rent, well, then who knows what's going to happen. You want to know that's actually like a very logical response, guys. The problem is if you do it over and over again, what happens? It starts to feed into the person's use, and it also destroys you. This is probably the more important part of this conversation. If you just keep doing exactly what you're doing, I'm assuming if you're here tonight, you have some concerns and you're worried. If you keep doing exactly what you're doing and you don't explore other options, the idea would be eventually it's going to take you out. And statistically speaking, I don't know if you know this or not, that's the most likely outcome of the situation. Believe it or not, despite the fact that overdoses have gone through the roof, the most common, the person who's going to get hurt is you, statistically. Family members are 5 times more likely to be hospitalized for a stress-related disorder than the family members of people who are addicted than the general population. That's why you go to this idea of what can I do different? But again, we don't necessarily need the label enabling. We just let's just call it like that. That's not a real good decision. Can you do something different? You get the difference? We go out of our way to try to work on that, guys. I mean, I've been doing family therapy for probably 12 years. I've been doing interventions. I've been doing drug and alcohol work for almost 20. And I cannot tell you, when families come to me, they present as if they're like part of like the worst people on face here. I can't believe like shoulders are slumped. They label themselves. They have names for themselves. I'm the poster child for enabling. And I don't know where they heard that or where they got those concepts, but whether people believe it or not, guys, there's nothing productive about that label. It's not going to help you solve the problem. What's going to help you solve the problem is, here's what's going on. It's not working. Here are my options. Which one can I do? We'll try to keep it exactly at that level. Go back to detachment real quick. So detachment is emotionally and many times physically pulling back from the person. But you're not doing an intervention and you're not doing a meeting. But it's incredibly difficult because you have to not take phone calls in the middle of the night. You have to get, if they're, hey, I got lost, I'm in such and such, the car broke down, it's 2:00 in the morning, can you come get me? You have to not go get them. You have to start to let the natural consequences start to fall into place. And also, you have to change your emotional response to situations. That's usually, that people forget about that part. And I'll give you an example. So there was a survey done of heroin addicts in New York City, and almost 80% were calling their mom every day. Or if it wasn't their mom, another significant family, but most of the time it was mom. And the question was, when people were talked about that and said, well, why would they be calling? What do you think everybody said? They're calling for what? Money. Most of the time it was not money.
I love you.
Yeah, I love you. Can you connect? Some kind of a validation. There was something about the connection that they were seeking from somebody who was close to them. The idea of emotional detachment would be, I can't stand the way I feel after these interactions. This happens quite a bit, believe it or not. So my son's calling me and he's high while he's calling, and when I get off the phone, I cry for 2 days. Do you follow? So the idea would be you detach from that so that you don't continue to destroy yourself. And that's also very, very powerful in influencing the other person's behavior. Yes?
How about, I just read this comment, I'm in a detachment now, I feel like I am lost, I haven't heard from her in 3 weeks. So how about some of the hard aspects of detachment, how to deal with that?
Very difficult. I don't know if you could hear the question, but the question is, okay, fine, I detached. But she left and I haven't heard from her for 3 weeks. So, you told me to detach. I'm not taking phone calls, but my heart is breaking. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. My stomach, I feel like I'm gonna throw up all day. I'm at work and I'm doing my thing, and all of a sudden, like, the panic hits me. This is whenever detachment becomes almost overwhelming. And so how do you deal with that? You have to deal with that by you have to almost get your own therapy for that, another support group, a smaller support group. I'm going to tell you what you need for that panic related to detachment. You don't need to be standing here listening to me. You need to get one-on-one with somebody and be talking about it. And you almost have to talk about it over and over and over and over again. You have to process it and get it out of your head. Process it and get it out of your head. You're also allowed to change your mind around the issue. So the other thing that'll come up sometimes is, think about this just logically in terms of like what a therapist should do if they're helping somebody. If I'm helping Carolyn and she's coming to me and she's talking about I'm detaching from my daughter because I just can't deal with it anymore, it's destroying me. And then 4 weeks later, she's saying, this detachment is destroying me. Do you think it's okay for me to call her? What should I say? Yes, call her. What will happen is that professionals will tell you to stand on a matter of principle and don't call her and don't let her back in the house. Look, if it's killing you, man, you're allowed to take a look at it. Do you guys get that part? No one has ever negotiated addiction in their family well. No one has ever negotiated addiction in their family well. There is no such thing as a normal response to an abnormal situation like addiction. You guys get that? I'm sure that there are some people who maybe did a better job detaching, or a better job stepping back, or a better job kind of like walking out. But who could even say that that was the right thing to do at any given time? This is a matter of you taking all the information I give you tonight. And you don't even want to listen to me as if I'm this like authority on any given situation. You take all the information, you become a subject matter expert in your own right. And you start to say, what do I know about my loved one? What do I know about my loved one that makes him tick? Where are we at in this process? How long have I been dealing with this? I'm going to give you an example about that last one. How long have I been dealing with this? There are situations where there have been people who've dealt with a loved one so long, and it's happened over and over again, that hands down the thing that you should seriously consider doing is just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm getting on a cruise and I'm going somewhere, or I'm getting out of Dodge. I can't take any more of this. Do you guys get that? Like, it's exhausting me. You have to look at what age is the person? What other issues are they dealing with? What are your coping skills, and how can you get through it? What do you know you need to do? And make your decisions on what you're going to do with your loved one based on what's going on with your family. You got to be really, really careful, man, because you'll get around people who are in positions like me, and they will speak to you with this level of authority, like they know exactly what you should do. And understand that addiction and mental health is 100% intuitive. It is not precision medicine. It is not like looking at a broken leg and saying, look, there's a broken leg. Let's put a cast on it. We have recommendations. In any given situation, I can look at you and I can say, here's what I think you should do with your loved one. Here's what makes sense. This is what 90 people in your situation did, and it turned out okay. But you know your loved one much better than me. You know the situation much better than me. Come back, keep getting information, read, talk to people, learn more. The other reason why you want to think about you becoming kind of a mini expert in this is for the following. Understand that this is also a journey. It's not a one-time event. I know that's really hard to hear, but whatever you're dealing with right now, you could solve, and you still might have to deal with it down the road. The good news is people do get better. People get better. It isn't like recovery is winning a lottery. It's not like only a certain people. The bad news is people don't get better in the way that y'all been told they get better. You've been told by the TV and unfortunately by other people like me who do this job that if you do exactly what I say you do, here's what's going to happen. Your loved one's going to go to rehab and it's going to come out, going to go to this number of meetings and finish this intensive outpatient program and live happily ever after. If you do that, you do it, then you're going to be fine. That is not what it looks like, guys. It's, one step forward, two steps back, 5 steps forward, maybe a half a step back, so on and so forth. And then eventually the spiral goes and people get better. And you want to keep this in mind, and you want to keep working on yourself and coming to groups like this, because what will happen is as you respond, your loved one will get back on track quicker if he gets off track. I do this group, man, and it breaks my heart because I know what it's like to worry about my kids. I know what it's like to, love people and watch them go through healthcare issues. Okay. And I feel like sometimes I'm up here and I'm like a used car salesman. I'm trying to tell you, like, have hope. And, you're sitting there saying, you're full of it, Rich. It's not getting better. It's not getting better. This is where I'd ask you, like, to trust the process. The process is your education, your information, your stress management, your willingness to say the difficult things when you need to, but also your willingness to take care of yourself so that your head doesn't explode on the way to saying the things that need to get said. I'm not a huge fan of slogans, but we do know one accurate slogan is what? You put your own mask on first before you help the other person. That is an accurate kind of way of thinking about it. So this is, and you guys can have many more things on this list, or you might have many more things, but this is what you want to do. You want to start to think, what are we going to do about this? What are our options? Maybe you start to write it down. Maybe you call a call line tonight, or you get a coach and you start to process it. You come back here with questions, whatever it might be, but you start to figure this out. What other questions or comments about detachment, interventions, anything like that? Anybody got anything? Does it make sense at all? All right. So I'm not going to go deep into what is addiction because a lot of you have been here before. Addiction, it gets very confusing because not everybody who uses at a heavy level is actually addicted. The truth is the majority of people who use at a heavy level aren't addicted. Addiction involves a brain change. That's what it looks like. All right. So what you have here is you have a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And this happens, it seems that this happens between about 9 and 12% of the people, depending on what study you talk to. And so this neurotransmitter dopamine is what allows people to experience pleasure in life, contentment in life, psychological comfort. Everything's okay. That's what this is. This isn't euphoria. You get the difference? Euphoria is I'm giddy, I'm happy, I'm laughing, all that kind of stuff. This is everything's okay, I'm safe. All right? And this is where people want to be. They want to have enough dopamine. They want to experience pleasure. What it does from an evolutionary psychology point of view is it makes you go back and do the same thing again. So food, for example, produces dopamine. That is really good for survival. Agreed? Being in a safe group produces dopamine. Also really good for survival. Drinking water when you're thirsty, even reproduction produces dopamine. Good for survival. The problem is when you use substances, whenever any of us use substances, not only people who become addicted, you release an extraordinary amount of dopamine. Let's just take it in terms of units. Let's pretend food releases 10, where methamphetamine releases 25. Okay, let's say that like good conversation, being with safe friends, releases a 7, whereas opioids will take you up to a 33. I'm making the units up, but the deal is it's an unusual amount of dopamine. That's what gets you high. That's what euphoria is. That's the part that for any of us, if we smoke a joint, that's the part that makes it something other than just contentment. Is that clear? The problem is, depending on a couple factors, how old you are when you start is the number one factor. Genetic factors are involved. The particular substance has something to do with it. Some people, their brain will overcompensate for the flooding of dopamine, and they'll shut off the production of dopamine. And that's what this looks like. And if your ability to feel contentment is shut off on the way to using these drugs, what's going to happen is your brain is going to be psychologically compulsed to go get the substance. It becomes a survival mechanism, guys. It loses the party time. The party ends. It's no longer about that. It moves into, I need this, not I want this. And you don't know who it happened to and who it didn't happen to. That's the other part of the problem, right? It's not like I can point to anybody and say, it's you didn't, I didn't. And if you go to a room full of people dealing with this and I say, hey, chances are, 90, half of you don't have this issue. What's going to happen? Everybody's going to stand up and go, oh, cool, I was waiting to hear that, I'm out. So what you do is this is just the truth. We overcompensate. We err on the side of caution. So what we want people to do is to treat the situation as if this is what's going on. That's not uncommon in medicine at all, right? That is not uncommon. You have any kind of thing that could be whatever, you'll get sent for the next test. So that's how we handle it. You guys get this? It's not, there are many people who have been to treatment centers. There are many people who have been to meetings, and they may or may not be addicted. There are many people who it's very, very clear they are, just based on how long it's been going on, the substances, that kind of stuff. What we want these folks to do is let's jump in, let's do the whole thing, do the best you can with this. Sometimes they back off, sometimes they quit altogether. We say keep coming back, because what we think is no matter what the situation, the more you're involved in this conversation, the more healthy you're trying to be, the better off you're going to be. This, though, is what makes people do the insane stuff. This is the stuff that makes you scratch your head. Why would he do that whenever he knows he's going to lose his job if he continues to take those pills? Why would she continue to use drugs? She knows that DSS is coming over and going to take those kids because there's no logic involved. It would be like if you were in here, and I said, you don't eat anything for 5 days, and I put a pizza on that table, right? And you can smell it, and you're drawn to it. At a certain point in time, the logic goes out the window. Your better judgment goes out the window. It's a matter of survival. People talk about this part of the process as it's like I was underwater, and just being held underwater and just needed a breath. And that's where the compulsive drug seeking. Now, this is the psychological part of it, guys. If it's certain substances, you also have to add in the physical part of it. So opioids, for example, come with a very serious physical withdrawal, benzodiazepines, alcohol, that kind of stuff. That's addiction, for lack of a better term. It's actually called substance use disorder, severe. Any questions about this? Any questions? All right, the things that will get you there quicker, age of first use. Most people in treatment centers are between the ages of 12 and 14. Genetics, type of drug. The other thing you got to deal with is this phenomenon of craving. This was an interesting experiment they did. What they did was they took people, put them in a PET scan, and basically the part of the brain where you see the red is the amygdala. That's what fires whenever you crave anything. So the first condition was, this was a person who was watching a nature video, doing their thing. Everything was fine. You can see there's nothing going on. Take the same person, put them in the same situation, same video, except interspersed at almost unrecognizable levels are like rolled up dollar bills, white powder, even street corners will trigger the craving. And this is the other part of the process that we have to understand. This is why I bet you this frustrates family members as much as anything. This is the person who's doing really well for a while. And you can't understand, where did that come from? There are some situations where a person uses and people are like, I saw that coming. There are other situations where it's like that didn't, but what was happening is they weren't dealing with these cravings. And I'm going to tell you, this is Rich's take on the world, all right? But there are multiple pathways to recovery. There are many ways that people can get better from this. Regardless of what you hear, it's not one way. 46% of people put together their own pathway to recovery. All right. Now, we believe they do better if they have guidance and they have somebody supporting them, and we can help them figure that out. And there's some commonalities. But the point is, there are many ways to get it. But if there was one thing that I would have every single person do in terms of not picking up again, it would be change your environment, change your people, places, and things. The craving associated with the subconscious triggers that are out there. And what's interesting is many people are able to identify the blatant triggers. So this is the person who knows they shouldn't go to the bar, right? Because when I go to the bar, I smell alcohol, I see alcohol, it makes me, but I got no problem walking down that wine aisle at Publix back and forth, right? Because that doesn't bother me. I never drank wine. What he doesn't understand is that's also dinging him. Yeah. If there was any one thing, that would be it. Get stable physically first. I should have said that. Make sure you're stable physically, and then cut ties with all that stuff that triggers you. If you've ever been on a diet, you know what I'm talking about. Go ahead and try to be on a diet here at Favor Greenville and walk by that damn candy bowl.
Walk into the kitchen.
We have the worst outcomes on diets than any recovery center in the history of the world. Because we have powdered donuts in the out there, but if you make it through that, you can walk right around the corner and there's like the best candy in the world. You do that all day, and the next thing you know, you're just, I can only tell you what I do. It's like I got all the good stuff in my office. I take all the good candy to my office, all right? So what happens there? Every time I walk by, I'm getting dinged. As the day goes on, my willpower starts to fade away. I start to get tired. It starts to get late at night. Same thing on steroids for people that are dealing with substances. So if there was any one thing, it would be, can you step off and get away from that? It's not an easy thing to do because a lot of times people have to have a hard time finding new friends. The younger you are, it's almost impossible. I mean, I have great empathy for young people trying to stay in recovery. It is not easy. I ran a rehab in Pennsylvania. It was adolescent males, juvenile justice, adolescent males. And we used to tell them, like, get new friends. We want you to get new friends when you leave. Make new friends. And I remember we would do these exit interviews. We would talk to them. And they would tell you, like, I remember, Mr. Jones, can I tell you something? Yeah, when you tell us to get new friends, that's stupid. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you go make new friends. How do I do that? Well, you can go to the mall tonight, walk up to people and say, hey, I'm a drug addict. Can we be friends? Or I can go to a meeting and I'm 17 years old and hang out with 45-year-olds. I did that. My mom thought they were trying to molest me. These are the things that I was told, like literally, like that the world is looking at the person like, you're weird, dude. Why are you hanging out with 45-year-olds? Well, and what we were conditioned to say back in the day was, well, if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. You guys see that that's just not logical. So widen the view on where you could find good friends to hang around with. But at the very least, get back from that other stuff. Does that make sense? Do not tempt yourself. I wouldn't go pick up prescriptions for the first year. I would not go pick up prescriptions. Even with my kids, like penicillin. To this day, if I go to the pharmacy, it's not like I'm triggered. I don't want to make it sound like that, but I'm going to tell you, man, like, here's the deal. When you go and you're running doctors and you're always looking for these opioids, the dynamic is like this. While the pharmacist is going and getting the pills, you don't ever know whether you're going to get them or get arrested or like your heart is racing. You're sweating because what? They're going back there to get them. They're doing a little thing on the computer. Like, what the hell is she typing? She's running the FBI on me. Like, you don't know what's going to happen because you just spent the last 2 weeks running 7 doctors, jumping from pharmacy to pharmacy. I go to the pharmacy today and I'll have that same reaction. 19 years later. It's so encoded. Because remember what it was connected to for me back in the day. What was it connected to? The pharmacy was connected to what?
Relief.
Survival, not just relief. Survival. That's what this is, guys. And when I tell you this, the reason I tell you this is not to give you an excuse for your loved one, so that you 100% know what you're dealing with, how to communicate, how to think of this. This is not just a little bit of a bad habit. This is deeply, deeply encoded stuff that starts to take on a different level if the person has crossed that line. And again, I want to give the caveat that none of us, I'm not saying every single person has. You understand that part? All right.
You can't stop them from
hanging out.
Going to those places.
No, you can't. You can't. Well, I haven't figured out how to do it yet. You know, if I ever figure out how to do it, I will be a rich man. Because that would be, that would be the code to crack. I don't know if you guys can hear it. You can't keep your loved one. And how about we should even expand that beyond friends? You can't actually make them do any of this stuff. You can become aware of it. What can you do with the awareness around this issue? How would this benefit family members? Carol?
One of my thoughts is, and we face this with our daughter, is it the person who's addicted's responsibility to say, I can't go there? Or say it's the July 4th and the family always goes to the lake, drinks beer on the boat? Or is it the family's responsibility to say, we're not going to have beer this year?
It's the person's responsibility. Now, there are a lot of times families will do that.
Right.
And I'll tell you, one of the most common questions is, should we have alcohol at Christmas? Should we have alcohol at Thanksgiving? And the deal is, it's ultimately the person's responsibility. I will tell you this, though. If the family can go ahead and not have alcohol, that's going to help the situation. Now, remember, that's alcohol. Alcohol is legal. Alcohol is everywhere. There is no such thing as recreational heroin use, right? So there is no situation or circumstance where a person should be hanging out at the trap house. Can we all agree to that? You don't need to go to the dealer's house. There's no such thing as we're going out to happy hour to the dealer's house, right? People will say, I couldn't avoid happy hour. I had to go. My boss was going to be there. Maybe, maybe not. But there is no legit reason why you need to be associating with somebody who is dealing your substance of choice. And I think that as family members, how this can help you is you can be very, very aware of this. And remember, the philosophy of Favor Greenville is it's okay to ask questions about this and you can state your take on it. This isn't going to end well, And you're going to get pushed back and people are going to tell you how it's no big deal. I will tell you, though, there's a lot of studies and a lot of research about people being reminded in the moment to make better decisions. And a lot of times family members wind up being the only person. There are some apps now that, believe it or not, you can take your phone and you can put in the dope man's address and you can put in like the bar's address. And if you're in your car and you're near that area, you will get a text message that says, looks like you're in a bad part of town. This is where you said you didn't want to be. Please leave and, go back to your safe place. It'll be like a plan that's in place. And that'll get kicked to your coach who can call you if you want. So it's kind of like in beta. It hasn't been like rolled out completely yet, but that still requires what though? It still requires the person to cooperate.
Make the right decision.
Yeah, and if the person wants to shut that off, they can shut that off. So
It might be enough.
well, the theory is for some people it is, and I can tell you right now in my case in early recovery there were now I always wound up being the one to make the call, but I know for sure there were several occasions where I had to get reminded. I had to get my mind out from where they were.
Well, and I know of at least one time when I called her coach and her coach called her and she turned around and came home.
Yeah. Yep. So you're dealing with a situation where there's a lot of pitfalls here. Agreed? There's a lot of different issues that you're dealing with, and this idea of setting boundaries. And what can the family do? If we go back to this idea that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, there is a general principle around learning how you want to take care of yourself and learning what's okay with you and communicating that to your loved one. And most importantly, following through with that communication. All right? And that term is always called boundaries. Yes?
How do you confront a restaurant manager who's actively helping your child get drugs?
So that's a fantastic question. The question was, how do you confront a restaurant manager that's actively helping your child get drugs?
Is the child under or over age?
The child is over age. Let's assume they're over age. If they're underage, you might have more options. Why does this freaking thing do this? Do you see this? How it runs? Here we go with the freaking Purdue Pharma's in the building. Purdue Pharma, get out of my building. They're starting to sabotage me again. All right, so let's go back to the original question. What would you guys do in a situation like that? The question was, what if the person, I'm assuming they're working for, the restaurant manager, is supplying the person with drugs? Anybody have any thoughts on what they would do? No right or wrong answer, but what would you?
Without going
Call
to
the
jail?
police.
Who said that? That's what I would do.
Seriously.
Here's where I go with it in situations like that. Now again, you're going to put this through your individual circumstance, because some people would say, well, that would be very dangerous, or my loved one would lose their mind, and it would make things worse. If it's going to make things worse, don't do it.
I would say they aren't even doing it.
But where I go with it is, if I actively know that somebody's supplying these substances, and there's anything that I can do to make that a little bit more inconvenient, I would do it. I might try to talk to the person first. I might try to, I'm not sure what that would be like. I don't even know if the police would do anything, guys. I've had situations where I've given this type of advice, and the parents have said I did that, and the police said, well, what do you want us to do about it?
And that's
So-
what's going on when we get there. We can't do it.
Yeah, and it's very difficult with that. Like, it's very hard for you to be like a third-party witness. The idea of calling the police would just be to make it inconvenient, to be perfectly honest with you. It would be kind of, generally speaking, would you guys agree with this idea? People that are doing drugs don't necessarily like police being involved in any kind of way.
It's hard to talk to your dealer in Chili's parking lot.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you that that's the 11th commandment or anything, but there's a correlation. We don't. And so the idea would be, if it becomes too much of a pain in the butt, will the person say, you're not on my list anymore? It's unlikely that police would do anything.
Their dealer might quit dealing to them.
That'd be that. The idea with all of these things are, how, first of all, you have to put it through like a template for your situation. How realistic could that even be? What would that be like for you? How would you feel after, your loved one's going to come home and what? Freak out? All that stuff. The details are very, very important. But you are like in a situation where you're aware of illegal activity. And you can, I'll give you an example of stuff that happens, probably even more than this, believe it or not. There'll be situations where in the neighborhood, there will be a family who buys into this concept of buying alcohol for the 16-year-olds because that's safer that they're here. They're in the basement, And I've heard of many situations where a parent has called the cops on that. That would be, and that can blow things up. So you can apply that same type of principle. What you have to do if you're doing any of those things is you want to be saying to yourself, can I pull this off? Am I going to be able to follow through on this? Is this going to make things worse? Is this going to make things better? All of those type of things. And understand that, again, there's no right or wrong answer. Let me turn it. Nobody should be calling me. If people are out there and they're trying to call me, why would anybody on Facebook be trying? Don't call me. Dude on your truck. Okay. Sorry, guys. The technology issue here at Favor Greenville, we're evolving. All right. We're moving into the 21st century. Bear with us. Yes.
How do you process, this is something similar but a little different? If you know somebody's doing something dangerous, they're not meeting the bounds of their parole, they change phones, they're not paying their monthly blah blah, they're not going to the programs they were supposed to.
You have like direct, okay, so it's a good question. So you basically have a person on probation, you have direct knowledge that it's not going down,
And it's gone on for 6
where I would go with that, and again, this is just me saying it as a person who kind of like works in the field, is I would try to use that as leverage in an intervention or something to get the person to do what they need to do. If you can't do that, then it's a fundamental choice, very similar to what was being discussed here. It's one of those circumstances that you're not going to know how the probation officer is going to respond until you call. No one can tell you. There's no black or white answer on how they would respond. Many times you kind of fill this out and you check it out. I don't know what they would say to something like that. I know many probation officers I've worked with professionally that would take that information very seriously. But you can also use it if it's your loved one, if it's your loved one's friend, then that's a different story. You probably can't do much about it. But many times you can use that type of information to leverage the person to get some type of help, to start the ball rolling forward, that kind of thing. Great question, though. Fantastic question. What other questions about that part of the process or thoughts?
Shouldn't a probation officer know that John Doe's not showing up?
So there'll be, even the way the probation and parole works, it's such a long and extensive caseload. They do know, but there will be a process of working, like the warrant to be issued and stuff. And many times people don't even know that they know and that they're going to get in a jam. Like the warrant will be issued and it'll take months to work through the system before it actually like gets to the person being picked up. To the point where I've seen people start to do better and then get picked up. So he knows, every probation officer knows whether or not a person is showing up. What they don't know is whether or not they're using and what else they're doing. And I'm sure every probation officer is going to handle that differently, and it depends on what the crime is and what the statutes are. I've seen situations where the legal system and legal charges have been used to absolutely leverage results. If you have a person who's completely out of control, that sometimes is how it plays out. If you're able to approach this and you have any control as a loved one, that's good too, because you got to be careful. It could also make it worse, right? And the idea is, how can you find out the information you need to find out? Are you allowed to call the police, for example, and not even file charges or do anything, just ask questions? In today's world where addiction is becoming more and more prevalent, some police departments are doing those type of things. I'm not going to say they all are, but maybe what you can do is you can start to find out before you pull the trigger on anything. I wish that there was a better, like more direct answer than that. I can tell you 10 reasons to call and 10 reasons not to call. You guys get it? If you want to know what I would do, I would start making phone calls and I would start to try to figure out, what can I do to rattle this thing loose? If the general idea is that the person is going on doing their thing, let's just pretend, let's talking way big picture type stuff. Addiction, what? Here I am, Rich is doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. I really don't want anything to be different. It sucks, I don't have any drugs, okay, I get them, I'm okay, so on and so forth. What can you do to make that different is what it would be, without making it worse. And sometimes the legal system is part of that.
But it's hard because if they're keeping a job, they've got a roof over their head. I mean, it's like you're just waiting for it to explode.
And maybe that's what you're doing. And maybe the only thing you can do is monitor the situation. And while you're monitoring the situation, you have to try to take care of yourself. How do you live with an absolutely unacceptable situation, an anxiety-producing situation, a trauma-producing situation? That sometimes is the thing that becomes the most elusive. There are times you have answers, right, guys? There are times that things go down and you see the answer right in front of you. You know, here are my options, and I'm going to do this. We talked about that family group. I'm going to do this, that kind of thing. Then there are times when you're stuck in a situation where there is no clear answer, and you know what? And there really isn't an answer. And the only thing I have right now is, how do I not go crazy as this is unfolding? And why? Okay, so let's compare it to another chronic disease. Let's just compare it to any other chronic disease, right? Your loved one gets sick. It had nothing to do with you. You don't want it to happen, but it happens. And you get to this point where you're worried to death, but you're doing your life, right? That's easier than addiction. And the reason is, in addiction, you are always thinking, what else could I do? It's not like my 6-year-old when he was laying in bed and I could see everything was being done. You get the difference? It's like, where are they? What are they doing? What else can I do? Who could I call? What if I talk to so-and-so? What if I called that person? I remember the counselor he had at rehab. I remember the counselor he had when he was 3. You get it? It's like this, your mind never shuts off on the problem-solving part. You could have just as bad of a situation with other healthcare issues. Agreed? There are actually some healthcare issues that are probably much more dangerous than this. But the person is there, and you're saying to yourself, we've done all we can. We're here. We're going to wait. We're going to see what happens. You wait. The doctor comes in. The person is still there. It's not like that here, right? It's not like that with addiction.
That person wants that.
Well, okay, yeah, you go to the person, that I'm describing with cancer. Hey, Carolyn, we just got you a bed at the Mayo Clinic. You want to go? Like, oh my God, they hug you. You go to that same person, like, hey, we got you Betty Ford, and they punch you in the face and run. So they don't want help. And that is the part of this issue that is so incredibly difficult to deal with. And that is why it is so disingenuous for anybody to look at y'all and say, just detach, let go and let God. Just let go and let God. If that works, do it. But I'm going to tell you right now, I understand why it wouldn't. I understand why it wouldn't. Because while you're trying to let go and let God, the other half of your brain is doing what? Well, maybe, but. And if you wanted to, you'd have a list of 20 things over here. And so this is what we got to start to help you figure out, guys. And the closest disorder to addiction is not some of those chronic diseases. It's actually something like Alzheimer's. There's a book called The 36-Hour Day that describes living with somebody who has Alzheimer's. And I recommend you read it because it also describes you guys living with somebody who is in active addiction. It's all day, every day. You never relax. One day feels like a day and a half. And here's the problem. If you don't figure out how to back that off and start to do something with that, it will kill you early. It will put you in the hospital. Stress-related issues are connected to about 70 different very, very serious physical consequences. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's shift gears and let's talk about that reality. We all acknowledge that probably everybody here is dealing with some version, or you have dealt with some version of that. Where do you go with that, and what do you do to reconcile that reality? Does it, and anybody can start. How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I just got back from 4 days in Florida. And it was wonderful.
So you took off. Was it a vacation?
Yeah, pretty much.
So go to Florida, go on vacation. How did it feel?
Wonderful.
You feel like you detached from it and
Because I couldn't do anything if I wanted to.
What do you mean? Oh, you're in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sounds like you guys got to go to Florida.
I can't do anything.
So you didn't have any other choice.
Yeah, and I refused to keep this with me. If I went anywhere other than my friend's house, my phone stayed at her house.
So you didn't take the phone with you to the beach. You didn't take the phone with you.
Exactly.
So there's a strategy around this, and I guess this is what I'll talk about. Like, you went to Florida, but let's pretend you didn't even go to Florida. What about the connection part of life today? I've shared in here before that I will a lot of times talk to my mom about what it was like to deal with me and my brother. My brother was out of control as well. And when I left the house, she had no choice but to let go and let God. There was no other option. I guess she could call a landline, if I happened to tell her where I was going, but she sure couldn't pick up the phone and check where I was. And she couldn't hammer text me. Oh my God, if my mom would have had a texting opportunity, she'd have had next level skills in that area. So there was nothing you could do about it. But in today's world, if you want to, you can know what's going on, or at least where your kids are at pretty much every given moment, or where your husband, so you have to work harder to detach, is what I would say. How weird is it? Think about this for a minute. Those of you who grew up in a different era, how weird is it that you freak out if you haven't heard from them for like a half a day or something, or all night? Do you understand? Like, there was no such thing as texting.
Yeah, you think about when you were in college.
And nobody called me on the phone every 15 minutes on the landline. Be like, just checking in. Good night. Love you. Okay, Mom. Right? That didn't happen. You were the person was on their own. The mom, the dad they were on their own, and of course they were scared. But it was like, in your hands, God. Now today, you can have tracking devices. You can probably have tracking devices that people know. You can probably have tracking devices that people don't know. But the big thing you can have is texting. And they didn't respond. How long has it been? 17 seconds.
I'm not that bad.
17 seconds, and I haven't heard anything. Let's go. Get in the car. We're going. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what do you do? So you literally physically detached. How else do we deal with that, guys? What other options or things? Where do you keep your phone at night? You keep it right next to the bed? I do.
I don't anymore.
I do.
I turn my phone off.
You turn it off at night?
Every night.
That's
Mine's
okay.
In the other room on the charger.
Did you start turning the phone off at night as a result of this situation, or did you always turn it off at night?
Because of the situation that I was in, so I just turned it off.
Okay. And I've heard that before. What has that been like? Is that hard to do? Have you found that?
No, it was peaceful. I could sleep.
I have not developed the ability to do that yet. Not even necessarily related to my kids. Of course, it has to do with my kids, but also just in general, I haven't been able to develop that ability. So I would imagine you have to work at it. What else would anyone share about this? Maybe I'm the only person who can. You all can do it. Is that what you're saying? But I'm reading your nonverbal cues. I am a trained observer of human behavior, and I'm looking at the art. And you guys.
I have to know. I have a need to know.
Okay, so you do what I do. So tell me more about the need to know.
Well, the other thing is my coach made me, and I say that word loosely, she was signed into her dad's iPad. So I knew things that I shouldn't know.
Oh, did you guys hear that? Sometimes too much information. So your daughter signed into, you said you kind of accidentally sign in and then you can read too much. Yeah, that's something you don't want to deal with. And so you jumped off of that, and that maybe also helped you jump off this other
And
stuff.
it was like, okay, what's the next step?
What is this idea of I have to know? So the other end of the spectrum, Carol saying I have to know.
I just have to know that I don't know. I just have to know what's going on. I have to know where she is, what's happening. Is there anything I can do about it?
Even if it's bad?
I had to know.
Yeah.
I just had to know that.
Yeah.
And she was in the hospital, which she was many times with an overdose. I had to know that.
So can anyone relate to that? Like, and if you didn't know it, what would happen? Would it be almost like your mind was drawn to like
Crazy.
something's happening, and so I need to know what's going on?
As long as this phone is not ringing, it's okay.
Yeah, but if it's because it's off, now we have a problem, right? So there is a phenomenon around worry. So when you study worry, one of the issues with worry that's very that's kind of like baffling to people is a lot of times people will report, I worry because I'm afraid like it's almost like it'll produce better outcomes. If I just relax from this, something bad's going to happen, and that's almost like a form of that.
Yeah, I have gotten to the point lately because it's been a while since she's been active that I just have started turning my phone.
Yeah.
Even though I know there's a remote chance it could happen again.
So the connection part is part of it, and you might want to start saying to yourself, what are the rules I can do here? How can I pull back from it? Who else would want to share anything about that part of the process? Or anybody on Facebook too, if you have any questions. Yes.
My son's, still lives with me. And when he first started this, he would steal.
Yeah. Yep.
So he ended up winning overcomers. When he was there, I knew he probably would come back because I had kicked him out before. So I put cameras in my house.
Oh, okay.
And so I keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
But sometimes it
can be too much. Absolutely. And what you're experiencing right there is many times, even if you go back away from the idea of cameras and texting and stuff, many times people will have to ask people to leave because it's too much. It's not about stealing even. It's about, if you're going to continue to do this, I literally cannot watch it happen. I cannot watch this happen. And so the idea would be how you communicate that to your loved one is very important. What we would say is that you say that like, you don't understand. I would prefer to you be in the house, but you're killing me. This is killing me watching you self-destruct like this. You're going to have to go, not because you're stealing, just I love you too much to watch you die in front of me. Like there's a reality to that. And that's where the detachment and some of the stuff that we've heard before, like terms like tough love and don't let them back in, that comes from that part of the world, right? So it makes sense. It makes sense that you're going to have to go there. What we're saying is that you don't go there automatically and you think it through and you make sure if you go there that you can stick to it. But it's incredibly painful to be aware of exactly what's going on. it's like the situation. I mean, let's think about something. Think about the kid who goes to college and goes crazy. That's not an uncommon story, right? The whole time he's there partying, doing all kinds of wild stuff, all kinds of behaviors. He could have died on any given night. Nobody knew and nobody said anything, right? Same kid comes home for the summer and starts doing it. Parents take notice. The dynamic totally changes and they're up all night. And it goes back to this like out of sight, out of mind thing. And I'm not saying that people should put their head in the sand, but I am saying that you're a person too. And desperate times, I mean, this is serious stuff. And what can you take in your life? What do you want to know about? Carol's point, I wanted to know. Your point, you might get to the point where I don't want to know. Both of these are legit. What's the most important part of the formula though is where are you coming from on this? Because do you understand, like it's not going to be the same for every single person in this room. And it's also not going to be the same for you today as it might be a year from now. If I could give you any piece of advice, you are going to change your take on your situation over time. You're gonna change it. You're gonna start to shift. There are gonna be things that you're able to do that you were never able to do before. You're gonna be able to sleep at night not knowing what's going on when you can't even comprehend doing that now. And part of that's gonna be as you deal with this stuff, you will become more used to it. And if you keep coming here, you will start to learn how to have a perspective and you will start to hear how this goes on. You will find a way to be okay. You cannot hang you being okay though on somebody fixing your kid. That's it. We talked about meaning before, and remember we talked about Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. So read this book once a year. I read this book. It's the best book that I've ever read. All right. The first part is about his experience in a concentration camp in World War II. The second part is very clinical. It's about logotherapy. You might want to skip that part. It might put you to sleep. The first part will not put you to sleep. It's about his experience and how he survived a Nazi, as a Jew, survived a Nazi concentration camp. And what he observed is 4 different types of folks in the camp. And in terms of like who survived the longest among the prisoners. And the first thing that he saw was there were people who were like narcs. They would tell on other prisoners. They were the guards, kind of like favorite. They got better food. They got less difficult work duties. They didn't get sent to the concentration camp, but they died first. Theory being that they went against their own beliefs. They sold out their countrymen. They died first. There was a second group. They were very negative. They were kind of like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Everything, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're never going to get out of here. They died second for obvious reasons. This is where it gets interesting. The third group was called, we're optimistic, overly optimistic. This is what they would tell themselves. The Allies are coming, we're going to be out of here by Christmas. And they would die of a broken heart. When they didn't come at Christmas, they just gave up and gave in and died. The group that survived were called tragically optimistic. And it goes like this. I don't know for sure that things are going to be different, but I believe they can be different. And if they are different, here's how I can help. Or if they can be different, here's how I can help this along. Do you get the difference? Mm-hmm. The first one, overly optimistic, is when you tell yourself, if I just get my loved one to rehab, everything's going to be fine. And then he or she comes out, and they're getting high on the way home. And it just kills you because you thought for sure this is going to do it. The second one is different. You look at people like me. You look at people of favor. You hear stories. You meet people along the way. You know that this thing called recovery is possible. It's actually like much more common than anybody knows. And you tell yourself, I can't guarantee it's going to be different, but I believe it can be different. And I believe I can do certain things that can make it more likely to be different. But I still don't know, but I believe it can be. And that's called tragic optimism. That's That's what he used to get through a concentration camp and come out the other end. So the deal is, you start to tell yourself, you don't buy into, there's two things you don't buy into. The first is there's no way out of this. This will never change. And by this, I don't even mean necessarily your loved one. I mean the way you respond to your loved one. Do you get it? This, I'll never be happy. I'll never be okay. I'll never go to Florida and turn my phone off. You get it? I'll never. Why? Because they're using drugs. It can be different, guys. It can be different. You literally, regardless of what's going on with your loved one, you can live a good life. You can live a good life. There are people who get better from this simply as they get older. Simply as they get older. So what can you do to move it along? You can do things like explore all options. You can do things like come back in here tomorrow when the staff are here, and we'll talk to you and we'll help you get Narcan if it's an opioid that people are using. You can talk to your loved one about that. Do you follow what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be all about get them to rehab and you'll be happy for 30 days because they'll be out of rehab like that. And then also you keep coming back to the group, and maybe what you do is you need to get somebody to talk to one-on-one. Maybe it's a therapist. Maybe it's a coach.
Come to the Wednesday speaker meeting.
Come to the Wednesday speaker meeting. We have a Wednesday speaker meeting at noon. Is that what you're talking about? What is it about that meeting? And now this is a speaker meeting for people that are people who are in recovery or need recovery. This isn't a family speaker meeting. What's it about that?
Well, or even an NA speaker meeting, whatever you want to go to. But for me, it's hope. When you hear this person talking about that they were every bit as bad as your loved one, but now they're clean and they've been clean. And the more they talk about that and how their life has changed, I mean, it's just hope.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I also think that, I'm kind of disappointed you didn't say this, Carolyn, but you could go on Rich Jones's Recovery Cartel blog and or YouTube page, and I have every single family group that I've done on those pages. I have many, many stories. I have many things that tap into recovery. You can keep coming back to this group, and then as this group starts to evolve and we start to do other things, you can also start to ask what other information do I need, or what is it that I need in my situation? Is it an interventionist? Okay, it's not an interventionist. We've done everything we can there. It's I need stress management. Can you help me get to what can I recommend? Is it exercise? Is it some of the things you see, guys, like people who get into a really good daily routine around prayer and meditation would be an example. The last things that I'm going to say before I talk about some business related stuff is a couple things that I fully recommend. One is journaling. One is writing about what you're dealing with. All right. Almost like a diary. Keep it private. You don't need to let anybody see it. Just write. You're trying to get it out of your mind. Get it out of your mind. The second thing is write down 3 good things. I've talked about this before. Write down 3 good things that happen to you every single day. And if you really want to do it right, give yourself a challenge where you're going to do 3 good things every day for 30 days and you can't repeat yourself. What that'll do is in the midst of all this terribleness, where you're noticing all the bad stuff, it'll make you start to notice some of the good. The other thing is if you have other people in your life, if you have other kids in your life, or if you and your spouse are at odds, or you haven't talked to your mom because you're dealing with your husband's addiction, whatever it is, go spend time with somebody else in your family who's not the addicted person. This week, do that. Go out to lunch with somebody who's not the addicted person. That person has been sucking up all your attention. They've been sucking up all your time. Call them up and say, listen, I want to get together. I just want to buy you lunch. Why are you buying me lunch? And I don't want to talk about your brother. We're not allowed to talk about your brother. I don't want to talk about your dad. I just want to get together and spend time with you. I don't even want to talk about addiction. I want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can talk about the Clemson Tigers. Or whatever it is you're into, that kind of stuff. You get the idea? And then the last thing I would tell you, and you did this, Carolyn, I don't think you have to go to Florida for this, but do something fun. And I don't mean fun in the sense that like it's a task-oriented kind of thing. It's like a hobby. I mean, something frivolous and fun. Go see a movie. Go play miniature golf. I don't know what it is. Go out.
I wouldn't have done that.
What's that?
I wouldn't have done that a year ago.
You wouldn't have gone to
You know
Florida.
what she's talking about. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What makes you do well enough?
Yeah. Did you guys hear that? Carolyn wouldn't have done that. You know, and the reason is what? Can you articulate what it
I
was?
was like Carol. I had to know every move she
You're
was
literally
doing.
afraid that if you go, somehow something's going to happen that you could have otherwise
You'll
stopped.
get
You guys
back
understand
on-
you're not stopping anything, right? If you could stop it, you would have already stopped it. Are we all clear on that? You would have already stopped. You just shut that thing down. So go do something fun. And I mean, do it this week. Do it this week. Don't leave here, get in the car and say that I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. Okay? In this subject area. If you do this stuff, it does start to work.
It does.
But Rich, let me ask you this.
Yes.
Our son lives at home with us. And our problem is we don't go out even to dinner or to a movie because we have the guilt. Because he struggles for anxiety and depression.
Yes.
And he drinks because of it. And we know he's not going to be doing anything because he doesn't have a car, he doesn't have a job. he's
So-
sitting at home. But we have that guilt. So guess what we do? We just stay at home.
Yes. So, and I want to tell you that, like, it's so good you're saying it out loud, because the thing is that like that, a version of that guilt story resides in all of us whenever we don't do something. And I'm not saying that you're going out every single night. And I'm not saying that you need to be mean about it to anybody, but you just go out. And the thing is that you staying in, this is from a factual thing. This is like a psychological process. By you staying in, it does not relieve his anxiety. It does not.
Makes ours go book time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go get a
honestly.
cup of coffee.
Here's what you do. You do it also related on this idea of doing something different. And you just go out and you come back and stuff. And as you start to do that, what you'll find is that it didn't get any better, but it also didn't get any worse. And then the other thing that will do is it'll start to give you a different perspective on things. And what you'll find is that there's probably a whole lot more that you could do different. Remember, guys, and this goes beyond addiction, we literally get into behaviors in our family. Like we get in a way of doing things in our family, in our community, in our world, but especially in our family, because it's just like what we do. So we stay in. We just stay in because we think if we stay in somehow, some way, that's what we're supposed to do. But it's not based on reality. It's not going to make it worse. You guys, and everybody in here has some version of that. Everybody in here has some version of, if I do fill in the blank, something bad's going to happen. Or if I don't do fill in the blank, something bad's going to happen. You'll get much more relaxed with that too. I guarantee it. It's part of it is the fear around it, the lack of familiarity, and it'll also ultimately wind up helping your loved one. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so I will be here next week. Now, if you're out there in Facebook land, and you guys can know this too, so Favor Greenville, we will officially launch this in January, but Favor Greenville, we've been brought into a bunch of different situations and doing a lot of different work. We're starting like a consultation and a training business end of this, not in the, everything in the upstate is free. The services outside the upstate and trainings and that kind of stuff, we're going to start trying to let people know we're here to teach other people to do the Favor model. All right. That's good news, isn't it, Carolyn?
Really
And so, and it's also good news organizationally, because we have to start to diversify the way we do this. We're never going to charge participants, but we are going to charge entities, hospitals, corporations, schools, those type of things, to teach people about recovery. Our vision is that we get everybody informed on it. The more people that know what this is and they understand and they start talking to their neighbors about it and they feel good about the idea that they don't feel good about, but they feel okay with the idea this is a healthcare condition and here's what we're dealing with. Can you see how if the world starts to move in that direction? So we're doing a really good job with that here, but we haven't been able to figure out a way to scale this thing out. So we're going to launch a project to get that done. That's part of the reason why we're more committed to what we're doing on Facebook, because we want you all out there on Facebook to spread the word in your communities. And there's a team of us that are going to get it done. And also it's going to involve a lot of online kind of training and distance learning. Yes.
Do you have a number like right now, the helpline, can just anybody call that?
No, that number is currently only for South Carolina. It's actually only for the upstate of South Carolina. The call line is only for, understand that Favor Greenville is supported by the generosity of donors. And so everything is free here because of unbelievable philanthropists, to be honest with you, and foundations and things. The call line is only for the upstate. And I know that sucks. But if we get there, we'll get there.
That would be
You know,
nice.
and I do know that there's a national warm line. If you were to Google it, if you knew somebody in another area, substance use disorder warm line. There's a national line. The difference is it's not coaches. It's not going to feel the way. When you call our line, guys, you're going to get our people. Do you get that? You're going to get our people, and they're going to come in here the next day and be able to talk through that. So thank you for being here tonight. We will be back here next week. Let's do one thing. Let's close this thing with the Serenity Prayer, please. If I can get a moment of silence for those still suffering with this disease and for the family members brought in this no choice of their own, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, good deal. Thank you very much. Now, this is what we do. Let's end this. What's that? If you end this, you'll be able to choose if you want to save or delete it. I'm going to end it, right?